I'm Daniel Steinberg, and you're listening to The Maggid Method, a new podcast about drushos. Today, my guest is Rabbi Yitzchak Sprung, rabbi at United Orthodox Synagogues in Houston, Texas. I first came across Rabbi Sprung via his podcast, Parsha Pick-Me-Ups. He loves the excitement and the energy and the magic of a live drusha.
When you speak in front of a live crowd, there's an energy, there's an electricity, there is something very much symbiotic. It's not a monologue, it's a dialogue.
We discussed Rabbi Sprung's process for coming up with ideas.
By the time I hit Sunday morning, I've already seen the 4 or 5 ideas I'm going to talk about that week, and then it's a question of development.
And some of his goals for the drushas that he gives.
I think more than anything else, what I really want is for people to be moved by Torah.
Now, without further ado, my interview with Rabbi Yitzchak Sprung.
The way that I found you, I think, was through the Parsha Pick-Me-Up, which is an interesting endeavor. And so tell me a little bit about that.
So I started the Parsha Pick-Me-Up last year, meaning with the beginning of the Torah reading cycle. Originally, a couple people in my shul said, you got to do a podcast. You give shiurim, you speak here, you speak there, you speak then. I can't make any of those times. I want a podcast. I'm on the road. I need something I can listen to. So I will make special reference to Barry Diner, who was one of the first people who said this to me. And I said, like, okay, if this is really what you want, I'm down. Let's do it. So the working title was the Barry Diner Parsha Podcast. So that's what we called it originally. We came up with a title that would be a little broader than that in its appeal. And the idea is, let's say something that feels new in a very short period of time. So if you're a person who doesn't want to listen to a 20-minute thing or a 40-minute thing, here is a short idea on the Parsha. It is bite-sized. I try very hard to find an idea that will be impactful or pack a punch and make you think. You're going to take it with you. And because it's so short, I really hope you can put it in your pocket and kind of like hold on to it and think about it, maybe over Shabbos, something like that. So that's really the idea with the Parsha Pick-Me-Up.
I heard the B. Cates one this morning. Listened to it because it's also I have a connection to it because it's my bar mitzvah parsha, so I like to listen to things B. Cates related. Yeah, thank you. And it definitely struck a chord. Definitely made me think. That's for sure. My question: it sounded very written. Is that something? Do you read it? Is that the way you do it?
Yes, I absolutely do. When I first started, I tried recording it and just talking, and I was so unhappy with the product. And one of the people that I enjoy listening to is Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik. Let's say I probably enjoy listening more in theory than in practice, but I think he's really fabulous. And I think you can tell with him that he's very much practiced. This is his spiel. He has what he's going to say, and he says it. And I've noticed the same thing is true of Rabbi Sachs. If you've ever listened to the Covenant and Conversation podcast, he's just reading the drusha. So I figured, you know what, if it could work for them, it could work for me. And so it definitely loses something in terms of the natural cadence that you would get in a drusha. Let's say my drusha is not like that. I do write my drushas. I do not read them. I don't do that. I usually, I don't look down on the page unless there's a quote or something like that. So it definitely loses that. But on the other hand, I hope it'll be very polished, and especially because I don't want to waste any time. I want to get it done really quickly. I don't want to have any extra words. Just get it, in and out. So that helps a lot with that.
Yeah, I thought it was effective, and it doesn't. When I said it sounds written. It doesn't. I didn't necessarily mean in a negative way. I mean it sounds. It sounds like you put the effort into it. It sounds like you knew exactly what you wanted to say when you went in, which I think is your goal.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very nice of you.
Yeah. No, I've heard podcasts like that before, where it clearly sounds like they're reading something that's written, but if it's powerful, it's powerful. And and you don't have, so maybe this is a good springboard into the drasha conversation, because you don't have the drawback of there's people in front of you and you're not present with them, you're not looking at them, you're looking at your paper, the podcast obviously is a different type of medium, so it's not as, I wouldn't say it's not an egregious I wouldn't call it a mistake, but it's not a big a problem, I would say. So tell me, you said you write out the drasha, but you don't read it. So what's the purpose of writing out? You write out word for word, or?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I do want to comment on the podcast as well. Just,
yeah,
because I read it, that actually makes up for the fact that I don't have an audience. Meaning when I'm speaking normally, I'm drawing a lot on the energy of the audience and on the faces and what they're doing, experiencing, thinking, or whatever they're mirroring back to me or giving me. And when I started the podcast, I had a lot of trouble trying to just give a Dvar Torah, but not to any particular person. And reading helps with that as well. So it actually it's in that sense a coping mechanism, so to speak.
So interesting. Yeah, that's really it's very difficult to just read something in a vacuum without without knowing where it's kind of disorienting. When it reminds me of when in the vaudeville days, when they had these performers, they would go out and they'd perform every night and do these spiels and things like that. And then when radio became invented, so they would do their spiels, but they would record them. And all their timing was off. All the energy was sucked out of the room. And so that's where they had live audiences, even though it was for radio. The audiences were really there for the performers to give them that sense of timing and energy. And definitely helps.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah, 100%.
So the drasha. So you write out the drasha, and you write it out word for word for in order to make sure you know exactly what you want to say. Or what's the purpose?
Great question. So the truth is, I used to specifically not write out my drashas. I rely a lot on the audience or the listeners or the people in the shiur, etc. So I did not used to feel the need to write it out by any means. And what I would do is basically I would write down a few notes of here's the progression of my ideas. This is the order of how I want to say it. And that remains for me still the most important thing. There's an idea, there's a place I want to go, there's something I want to say. And I try to arrange that idea in a way that will make it the easiest to follow and I hope compelling and will eventually lead you to have that takeaway that I really want, whether or not that's, whether it's an action item or it's just, something comforting or cathartic or whatever the case may be. I started writing them because there were a couple of people who were asking, every shul has some very generous people who are always very nice to the rabbi and they say, oh, can I read that? And that always makes you feel very, very good. There were a couple of people who were asking. I had in the past been reprimanded for never writing my drushas. If Rabbi Leonard Matanky listens to this, so he, then he'll find out that it actually worked. He once said to me, "You got to write them down. This is something you can give to your kids in the future." So that was an opportunity, and also because I live in Houston, Texas, and I want people to know that we're here, and I want people to leave New York and move to Houston. That's what I want. And so this was an opportunity. If in writing my drushas, this gives me an opportunity to put it somewhere and then hopefully get that in front of some eyeballs in the Northeast and just let them know that we're here. We have a community. Maybe you should think about us when you're thinking about relocating. So for all those reasons, I started to write it. It definitely adds clarity. I love writing. I went away from writing for a very long time because it's very time consuming, but I love it. And now it feels essential.
It shows. I've read some of your stuff. I read something about after the tragedy with the D's in over Pesach. I read what you wrote over there, and that also was very, very meaningful. We were actually in Efrat when it happened. The D family is from Efrat, so we were. It didn't happen in Efrat, but the family's from Efrat. So it really struck a chord. So when do you start? When does the process begin for a drasha? And today's Tuesday. Where are you in your process?
Great question. The process begins Mincha Shabbos of the previous week. That
As
is
soon as you
the
can do Shnei
process.
Mikra, as soon as
I start my Shnai Mikra early,
yeah.
and as I'm doing Shnai Mikra, which has in this current iteration of how I give drashas, Shnai Mikra is the most important thing that I do. I mean, I've had other methods, over the years. So I begin the Parsha. I read the Parsha and I take note of major ideas that people talk about. This is a big machlokas between, whatever, the Ramban and the Ibn Ezra, and this is something people should know about, or questions that bother me, or like this week, right? I don't know when this is going to come out, but okay, people will figure it out. You did just mention, Mikates, right? So the whole notion of the carriages, right? The agolot, that Yosef sends, and how often they're referenced in the text. It's very unusual, right? And Rashi picks up on that and he comments on it and he gives the famous medrash that Yosef's communicating the last thing they learned, etc. But it's such an unusual thing. There's a reason Rashi's bothered by it, right? So, and that's bothering me too. And it's very likely that this Shabbos I'm going to talk about that. And I need to have 4 or 5 ideas every single parsha, because okay, I've got the podcast obviously, and I've got the drasha, and I give a parsha share in the afternoon, and I give a dvar Torah on the parsha on Friday mornings. And then you just kind of never know, right? So it's a minimum of 4 things to say.
Something in your back pocket.
Yeah, exactly. You got to have that, right? Someone's going to ask for a dvar Torah at lunch. So you have to have like a minimum of 5 things to say on the parsha. And so as I'm doing Shnai Mikra, I'm noting those things. And what I will tend to do, and I will give credit to Rabbi Menachem Penner, who is the person who taught me this. What I will tend to do is try to quickly pick the ideas. I don't spend a long time searching for ideas. I used to spend hours and hours and hours searching for ideas. I know a lot of rabbis who spend a very long time searching for ideas, and it's like a part-time job looking for the right idea to talk about in the drasha. And I think that is very time consuming. So I just don't have the time to do that. So this way, by the time I hit Sunday morning, I've already seen the 4 or 5 ideas I'm going to talk about that week, and then it's a question of development. And again, credit to Rabbi Menachem Penner. This has been very important to me in every drasha or shir I think I've probably ever given since I was in Smicha, when he told me this idea. Once you have this idea, right? And I know Rashi addresses the question about the agolot, right? I translated it as carriages before wagons. Sometimes I have trouble going between. Right? I know Rashi says something, right? And if I just quote that Rashi, which I've heard a million times, that's going to be boring. So what you need to do is just take that idea and go one step further. What's something new about this that you haven't heard before, and that seems interesting and compelling, and what does it mean? And most of the time that works. Most of the time, the first 4 ideas that I find are actually sufficient to find something new that I've never thought of before. And then I can say, and they'll feel fresh because they're new to me. And if they're new to me, then hopefully they'll feel new to you.
So let's say you have a great idea that you develop the agalot, you find something novel and fresh about it, some interesting take on it that maybe doesn't emerge directly out of the Rashi. So now what? Where do you go with that? Are you trying to find a message in that to teach people, or are you trying to share an interesting new idea about Torah that they might not have thought of? Where does the Torah fit into the overall drasha?
So let's say in agolot, I think that the idea that Yosef is communicating with Yaakov and telling him the last thing that they learned is Egla Arufa, right? That is a very unusual idea that you really would not get if you just read the Torah without Rashi or Chazal. You would never, ever, ever get that. So one interesting I haven't written my drasha yet, okay, but I'm actually behind. I really do try to have it done by Monday. One really interesting path to take would be to ask, why do Chazal think that this could possibly be the meaning? I think that's a really interesting mystery. And maybe if we solve that, we'll find something really, interesting and compelling to say. Alternatively, because it's a very unusual idea that really doesn't reflect a plain sense of the text, but nonetheless, it is a major problem that has to be solved. If I click on Aha Torah and I look at their 25 sources or whatever they have, and I'll go through them, one by one chronologically. I'll search until I find something that makes sense and is meaningful. Or
Where
it's
do you
something
say you click on?
meaningful that
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't follow. Where do you click on? You go
Al
looking
HaTorah.
for
Al
Al
HaTorah.
HaTorah.
Oh, it's a great website. Strongly recommend this website, both for drasha and shiur work, but also just in general. It's like an expanded, Mikra Kedolot. So it basically ranges in time in commentators on the Chumash from let's say Onkelos and like the Targum Yerushalmi down through, I think the Netziv is like the last person. So that's a very long period. And so you've got various midrashim, and then you've got Rashi and the Yalkut Shimoni and the various super commentaries on Rashi,
Right.
and then you've got all the classic commentaries who are going to appear in any version of Mikra Kedolot plus 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 plus. And it's fabulous, and certainly I don't have access. I don't have a Rabbi Avram ben Rambam in my library. Um, Anyone who's listening, if you want to send me one, thanks so much in advance. But it's on there. It's on that website. And he writes the most interesting things. And there is no commentary from the Rambam on the Torah, but very often he will say something that it fits very well with what the Rambam would have said about X, Y, or Z. Or once in a while, he actually quotes his father, and that's fabulous and exciting too. So it's a really, really great resource. Really, really great.
How does it differ from Sefaria, let's say?
How does it differ from Sefaria? Uh, the options are a little bit different. I personally am somewhat of a Luddite, and Sefaria, I just don't find as pleasant. I don't find it as pleasant to like click on this and have that open. This is very easy. Everything's open in front of you, and you just click copy paste. In my backwards ways, it really works for me.
Okay. So you go on Altor looking to expand the idea that you want to develop. And are you looking for when do you know that you have something?
You feel that you've got something. That's 100% just an intuition, something that if it feels meaningful to me, then I think it'll feel meaningful to you.
And what are you looking for specifically in terms of meaningfulness?
I'm a very big believer in content is king. And I would very much like to say something, if at all possible, that is a reasonable and compelling way to read the text. And sometimes that text isn't the Chumash, sometimes it's a medrash, meaning it doesn't have to be pshat that we're looking for, but it has to be a reasonable read of some Torah content that is always going to be the centerpiece of what I say. Part of this is because sometimes I call my brother and we talk about my Divrei Torah, and if it's not, if it's not a reasonable read of one of the core texts, he's gonna let me have it a little bit, and I have that in the back of my mind. I know, I got to have something good for him too. I definitely like to have content as king, and I feel that way I'm contributing something real. I mean, if I'm really explaining the Chumash to you, if I'm really explaining a medrash to you, then I'm saying something real, right? And I can feel good about what I said. And not only that, I think that we could have a conversation in 10 years or in 30 years, and it'll still be a relevant piece of Torah. Yeah. And I feel very strongly that if I am anchored to the text, then I feel that I might be saying something real and significant and lasting. And so what I'll first try to do is find something that is really there. It's a real piece of Torah. That's the heart of the drasha, or the heart of the shiur, or the heart of whatever it is. And then, because it's very much content driven, then I'm going to decide what kind of drasha it's going to be, what the message or takeaway will be. Meaning, this past week I had no takeaway. There was no action item of what you need to do. I was trying to offer comfort to people. And really the way that I got to that wasn't that I thought on Sunday morning, this week I need to give some comfort to people. Really what happened was that I found an idea and it was comforting and that moved me. And so I thought, I'm going to share this. I think it'll be meaningful for the people in the room. And they can be comforted as well. So I try to let the content dictate what I'm going to do with it. And I think that also, I think that keeps it fresh for me because I don't know where it's going to go. And that makes it exciting and interesting for me as a process and in terms of something to teach.
Right. So let me ask you a question that might be a little bit challenging, which is, what would you say to someone who would say that, well, just email me your Dvar Torah, or let me read it in a blog post. Why do I need you to flesh that out for me? Or, why can't I just go in all Torah? Why do I need to sit quietly in my seat for 10, 15 minutes while you're there, teaching me some Torah? Give me something that will give me a new way to view things, or a new way to do things, something a bit more transformative that I can't get anywhere else. How would you answer that?
That's a great question. So first of all, I do share them with people, with anyone who asks, and I put them online. At the same time, it's a different product. It's a different experience. I try very hard to make them both worthwhile, but one of them is lightning in a bottle, if it works, at least. The drasha is going to be said once. Again, I don't actually read it from the paper. So whatever you get in the room will never, ever be repeated. And I actually love that because I think that there is a certain sense of fraternity in our shul. This is something we're doing together, and it can never be done again. No one else is ever going to have this experience. And even people in the community, if you're not in the room, that's it. It only happens once. And I love that it is something that we do together every single week, cannot be repeated. And even if you were in the room and you heard the drasha and I hand you the written version or put it on the blog post or online or whatever, you'll get the Dvar Torah, which is usually exactly the same, if not, sometimes I audible, that's just how that goes, right? You feel in the moment that something else feels, more right than what you had planned. But even if I give you that piece of paper, we can never, ever repeat the drasha. So I think there's a little bit of magic in there, and that has to do with the audience as well, right? In the room, we're having an experience right now. You're never going to have it ever again. You cannot repeat it. It's special. And I think that, chaval to miss it. I don't know. I think it's a great experience to get, I love to hear rabbis give drushas.
Tell me what you mean when you say we're doing it together. I mean, not everyone's speaking. You're the only one speaking, obviously. What does it mean together?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure I will be able to exactly put my finger on that. I do think, when you go to a shul and it's your community, it's your friends, it's your family, it's your people, it's even the people you don't know or the people you always see. You know what I mean? It's your people. We are in this together. We're trying to accomplish something. That group, that unique group, that makeup, I think every time we get together, we have a special experience. That's not only true of the drasha by any means, meaning when we're singing in Kedusha, again, same exact thing. You could go read Kedusha inside the siddur, at home. I mean, you can't because you don't have a minyan, but you could read it. You could read it, and you could have a chakras. You could do all these things. You cannot have the experience you have in the room with people, especially if they're your people. And I find that in our community, and I think this is probably true of communities around the country and around the world. You come in and you're greeted in a particular way that reflects our community. You're joining us today. I hope you feel like enveloped and loved because we just we love you. We're happy you're here. I think you get a special experience. And I think like we were talking about earlier, that when you speak in front of a live crowd, there's an energy, there's an electricity, there is something very much symbiotic. It's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. That is, that's live, right? It's live in the sense that it's happening, right? And it's, obviously it's not recorded,
Right.
but it's live in the sense that it's very much alive. And there's, I think, an energy between the speaker and the crowd that is being shared. There's something there, and I hate when I don't live up to that energy, or if I have an off day or something like that. I hate that. That's the worst, because
Mhm.
I love that energy, and I come in for that energy, and I hope other people do too.
Yeah. What do you what areas do you struggle with? What are your areas that still you find challenging?
For the drushas in
Yeah.
particular,
Yeah.
uh, I really, really struggle to find stories or jokes that I'm happy with and that I can deploy wisely and well.
Mhm.
You
So
know,
interesting. Speaking to the rabbi of the shul over here in Columbus, one of the rabbis of the shuls in here, and so same thing. He's like, all Friday, I'm looking for the perfect thing. It's like a needle in a haystack. So I collect stories just because I mean, the same reason. So I shot him a text saying, what do you need? What's the topic? I'll go through my
nice.
Rolodex. Yeah. So yeah, it's so where do you go? Where do you look for?
So I actually will not do the story unless I have it.
Hmm.
Uh, that's been, again, I've had different iterations of what my drasha looks like in the planning process. I used to spend so much time looking for the story that again, it was just like taking over my Friday, and I actually struggle. Like I have a friend, who seems like good guy like you, who I can call, and I can say, hey, do you have a story for me about X? And he does. Like he has the story. But unless I've heard that story or read it somewhere and it moved me, I actually can't give it over properly. I need to be moved by the story in order to share it, which makes it so hard for me to find a story that I, can tell over properly.
Hmm.
And that's another reason really that I go for the content is king approach,
Yeah.
because again, that way I can say something, it's going to work. It's about what it's about, and alternatively also, I will say, I don't know why more people don't do this. I think this is a fabulous thing. Like the Chumash is full of stories. That's what it is. Okay, and Vayikra, it's not, right? But it is full of stories. So the stories are already there. And very often the text itself just needs to be retold. You just need to remind people that it's already a dramatic story. And the same thing is very often true of Midrashim. There's already a dramatic story there. And it just needs to be retold. And again, that way that allows me to stick real close to the text, real close to the content, um, and and I'm excited about it. And I don't have to worry that there's some message in the story that's going to be distracting. Like you're going to come away wondering about what happened to the Super Bowl ring as though it was a MacGuffin, but really it was just a detail in the story. That's not the point. I wanted you to get the takeaway. Do you know what I mean? So that has saved me from that. Um, at the same time, I'm aware that stories are so powerful, and I very often think about, how can I fix this problem? How can I, more quickly find stories and develop ones that I like that will allow me to capture the audience and really you know, um, get them excited, get them hooked, whatever it is that you do with a story.
Yeah. Do you ever lean on personal experiences for stories?
That's a great question. When I write the drasha, almost never. Again, when I say the drasha, or actually deliver it, yeah, all the time. Um, uh, and again, when you're in the room with people, I think that it's almost more conversational. So I can do that. And people love stories.
Yeah.
I love stories. I'm not, I'm certainly not an exception to that rule by any means.
Yeah.
Uh, in the room, when we're live, so to speak, absolutely yes.
What else do you find challenging about the drasha in other areas?
Um, what else do I find challenging about the drasha? I really love drashas.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to think. I will say I do see the artists there are people who are traditional practitioners of the drasha. If you've ever read Rabbi Lamb, do you ever read his stuff?
I have a link to the website with all his the archives, so I'm going through that.
Yeah, so I think he's the best of the best when it comes to the art of giving a drasha, and I like wonder how he does it. And if I consider his drashas like the typological sermon, then I'm not giving a drasha at all. I'm actually giving you a drasha that a Dvar Torah that I hope moves you is a better way of phrasing it. So maybe the sermon is something I struggle with as a whole. Having said that,
you mean in terms of like the structure, the overall arc and the way it transitions from one part to the next and the
yeah, it's the structure, it's the cadence. I know rabbis who give a sermon every week, and you walk in and you listen to them and you can tell they are giving a sermon. And I think there's an art to it. And I have not mastered that art. I don't know how to do it, and I don't do it. And there was a time when I didn't appreciate it, and that time was before I read Rabbi Lamb, honestly. But there was a time when I thought, like, oh, I am so happy I never do that, and I don't think the audience wants it, and I'm not going to do it. But then you hear people react to listening to, Rabbi Sachs of blessed memory, and he was giving a sermon in a classical style, and people love it. They love it. There's an art to it, but I have not captured that art. That sermon style, whatever it is. I don't know its history, how it developed, or anything. I just note those two practitioners, Rabbi Lamb and Rabbi Sachs, and people love it. And I'm in that category. If I can find something that they wrote, yes, please. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So last question, and I know your time is valuable. So I wanted to ask you, you have this slot, you have the entire Kehila gathered together at one time, week to week. Someone described it yesterday as a sitcom. I mean, it's not a sitcom, but it's you're the lead character. It's prime time. You have everybody there watching. Is there something that you try to achieve with every drasha? I mean, each individual drasha may have a different specific goal, but is there something that you as the rabbi want to achieve with that slot?
So the drasha is different week to week, meaning some drashas, I would say the most common drasha I give is the quote unquote inspirational drasha, right? I'm trying to inspire you. I think more than anything else, what I really want is for people to be moved by Torah and then realize that that's actually what Torah is all the time. I really want people to know that Torah is transformational, and that if I study it and live by it, it will transform me positively. That's probably the consistent overarching goal. And if I've gotten through to somebody and they know that message, yes, I did it. That is it. And it is transformational. So if I can give you that idea, then I think I've accomplished my goal. That would be the broad goal, beyond whatever it is in particular that I'm trying to say. And I think that's going back to the method. I think that's part of the magic of Shnai Mikra as the source, for the drasha and for everything. It's not fancy, but the whole point is that you could just open up the Chumash and you're going to find things that are compelling, transformative, and meaningful and impactful, and that really need you to think about them and process them and live with them and live by them. And you don't have to look far. It's right there. So I think that's probably the main thing I really want to accomplish, and I want people to know.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. This was great. I really enjoyed talking with you. I'm hoping we can continue the conversation at some point.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. Learn more about the Maggid Method at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.